Lovely ladies and distinguished gentlemen all, it is a delight and an honor that I come to you this afternoon to share with you many of the facts and a few of the fancies of my life. I am Caroline Elizabeth Winder McGavock of Franklin, Tennessee. But before we get there, I should be born September 9, 1829, I was born to my parents. And I thank the good Lord every day that I live for giving me such a wonderful family. I was born in Mississippi, but it wasn't long before my entire family relocated in New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, my mother saw to it that I was given lessons in everything that the young women were given lessons in during that time. It was quite the thing if you were a young lady to play the piano, and I distinguished myself moderately with playing the piano. You had to know the proper etiquette if you were a member of the class that owned plantations and had either sugarcane or cotton products in the field. And so I was given etiquette. I was given riding lessons, which blended well with etiquette because it was forever sit up straight and ride your horse or pony well, and at the table, the same thing. Sit up straight, keep one hand in your lap on your napkin, bring the soup spoon to you, do not lean over. All these things are so important, don't you agree? But as I journeyed forward in life, I was to, of course, get a lesson in what really was important in life. When I was a young woman, I was called a debutante, and there was a coming out process. And every debutante had to have her portrait painted. When the artist arrived to paint my portrait, I had on a black satin gown, a strapless gown with ruffles around the décolletage, no sleeves, satin. I loved that dress. To me, black was just another color. And I was told by various suitors that it set off my then very fair skin without sun blotches and freckles. I loved black, but the portrait artist was insulted. No one, he said, that had set for a portrait with his artistic ability had worn such a dark, and he called it somber, color. He suggested that I change my gown to royal blue or emerald or crimson or some such. I refused. One of my personality traits is when I like it, I like it. When I don't, and I won't agree with you. And I did not agree with him. And so he left the room. And I sat there in front of the backdrop. And I sat there while the artiste went to talk to my mother. And he said, really, really, madam, for she told me everything he said, you cannot let your daughter sit for her debutante party in such a dark hue. You must help me to liven up this portrait. And she said, it is my daughter's choice, and she will not change her mind to suit you. So the portrait artist came back and adjusted how I was sitting, and you know how it goes. Turn your shoulder, turn your chin, tilt your chin, and you feel terribly encumbered. But he finally got me with my shoulder and my chin and everything perfect, and he painted a good picture of me. And I was 17 years mature. I had a cousin, John McGavock. In my day and time, it was not taboo, it was not shocking, it was called good planning for heredity. Cousins courted, cousins married. John McGavock had been 19 the year that I was born. So he was a man before I was a woman, but I dearly loved John. And we made plans to marry. He told me of his plantation home, Carnton, C-A-R-N-T-O-N. Now there is another spelling for corn that comes from Ireland, C-A-I-R-N, which represents a memorial or a tribute to someone or some ideology that has died. But his Carnton, C-A-R-N-T-O-N, he said, was the most beautiful plantation in the South. I had seen many a plantation. I had seen square pillars and round pillars. I had gone into the entry hall to see the beautiful staircases leading up to the second floor. I had seen the windows. I thought I had seen it all. But when you love the person who carries you into the home, somehow it takes on a different meaning. And I decided Carnton was the loveliest plantation in the South as well. And we were happy. And this was at the beginning of 1850. Now things were going to begin to happen. At first, slowly deterioration, but we knew that something was coming. I gave my husband 5 children within the next 6 years. But sadly, our first 3 children died. They were Mary, Martha, and Little John. Little John was named for his father. So we were left with 2. Baby Winder, who took my maiden last name as his first name, and my little girl, Patty, who at 7 or 8 years old thought she could rule the world. And there we were, and we were happy in Tennessee, very close to Franklin, very close to the Carter family next to us. But as things turned out, I tried to keep my husband away from going into combat. My husband gave a lot of money to the Confederacy, and because of this, he was granted a rank of colonel. It was an honorary title, and I don't think anyone expected him to go and fight. And he did not. We saved him from that. He was there for me and with me on the most horrible days of my life. I had been protected. I had been sheltered. I had been given lessons in things that mattered not a bit in the world. And there we were living a nice little life. We were now 4 years into the war between the states. It was 1864. It was November. I will never, ever forget the day. Some people called it Indian summer. The days were warm. The leaves were turning. It was beautiful. But we were getting reports from Franklin that a lot of men were marching through the town. Now, this was never, ever a good omen. Marching through the town to come toward us. We had also heard rumors that General Hood wished to reclaim Tennessee as Confederate, and that Nashville was a primary target for both. How do you prepare? How do you prepare with this knowledge? Mr. Carter came and got my husband that afternoon, early afternoon, maybe 1 or 1:30 in the afternoon. And he said, come, I want you to see something. I want you to see the tallest breastworks I have ever seen at our plantation. Now, the Carter home was not far away. I did not accompany my husband, but when he got back, he told me that these breastworks, if any of the soldiers broke over, it would be instant death because of the height of them and because the breastwork wood had been piked to a deadly point. So we knew. I had a governess for my children. She was wonderful. Her name was Lizzie Clouston. Lizzie Clouston and I talked. How do we prepare women? How do we prepare Hattie? Now, we did not envision what we were preparing them for. We never envisioned the slaughter that was going to take place on our front lawn, up to our very front door. We never envisioned 300 Confederates being carried into our home. We never envisioned that we would give up every room in the house but one. That would be for our family. But it was coming. It was coming, and we were so nervous and shaky and quivering and all akimbo because we knew what was shaping up. We thought we knew. So Lizzie Clouston and I, we got little Winder and Hattie, and my husband stood there and listened to us to add what we could to help. And we tried to prepare them. There may be a fight, dear wolf. Dear little Winder, that there may be some fighting later this afternoon and evening. And Hattie, you've got to stay in the house. No matter how loud and noisy it gets, you have to stay in here. You have to mind us. Right, John? You have to mind us. And please, please, dear Lord, please don't get near those big windows. You just don't know. There could be an artillery blast. There could be broken glass. There could be shrapnel. Stay away from the window. Now, Lizzie's going to take care of you too. I may have other things to do, but mind what she says. That evening, when it began, I don't think the sun had ever shone more brightly on the leaves. It was beautiful. And death was marching up the hill, those poor boys. My lineage was Scottish and Gaelic. Gaelic was like an old English term. So many of those boys fighting for the South were Scottish or Irish descent. Why had they come to America? For land, to be their own landlord, not to take orders from any English squire, not to be downtrodden and insulted and mistreated, where they'd all had to leave from New York City because New York shop owners put in their windows, Irish need not apply. Irish need not apply. Poor boys. Some were fighting to try and have 3 square meals a day, only to find out they had none. We loved our mass. If we'd have had more money, I know John would have given more. So he and I, on that staircase, we hugged one another because you could hear them. They always marched with a drummer and some young man carrying flags. And they were sizing each other up. They hit the Carters first. There were runners that came back and forth between the houses. If we could have cut and run, if we'd have had somewhere to cut and run to, but we didn't. The servants, the slaves that we didn't call slaves, they had been with us so long, they were family. We loved them. They loved us. We were all there wishing we could turn this event away. I cannot tell you what I saw that afternoon. Lizzie and I both trying to keep children away from that beautiful big window facing out on mayhem, utter mayhem. But it was catastrophic. They began to bring the boys, the wounded, the severely wounded, up to the front porch. We had to open the house. And so then we were all moving furniture in every room, getting the furniture against the wall, and we were cutting bandages, tearing up everything, our petticoats, our skirts, our curtains, our sheets, our dishcloths, everything to staunch blood flow or to wrap a bandage. And little Winder and little Hattie were just watching and listening. The percussion sounds of battles, the cannons, the muskets, the firing, the constant screaming and yelling. You cannot get away from it, not in a house. We had 13 rooms, but now we had 1. There were 12. The front hall, everything was given to the bodies that were laid down. We sent to town, find a surgeon, find a doctor, find someone that can come, but they could not reach us for the battle. So John took over. He converted the front parlor, making it as best he could into a surgery. And we did what we could, but we felt totally inept. And we saw these boys dying because of our ignorance and ineptitude. And we never encountered any situation like this. I had cried over a dead animal many times before in my life. And now my front yard, my front porch were covered with the dead of the battle. We did, in the next day, convert that parlor into a surgery. We did make as many comfortable as we could. And as the days lingered on, we knew we were in it for the long event. They had to be fed. They had to be clean. They had to be covered. They wanted to hold our hands. As we got close to them, they grabbed our hands. It was like a lifeline. They didn't want to let go. And they wanted us to write letters. Lizzie and I went bed to bed every morning and every evening. What can we do for you? Are you getting any relief? Laudanum. I had laudanum for coughs, and I administered it without knowing really what I was doing. My husband said, "You're going to make these boys all addicts." And I said, "If they live, if they live, God bless them. Let them be a laudanum addict." But I ran home and didn't have enough. And so we overfed, we over-listened. They wanted us to write letters, we did. They wanted us to read to them from the Holy Bible, we did. And they wanted me one day. They had heard me singing and humming that song, Lorena, at the time. And this poor boy, we couldn't keep the bandages on that would prevent the blood from coming through. We wrapped and wrapped and rewrapped, cleansed, and he wanted me to sing a song. Now, I was accused of being too sharp by my local teacher. I thought it was a compliment. I had heard that the English people said if you were sharp, that was a good idea, that you were dressed well, you were sharp. So when my local teacher said, "Oh, you're sharp," it was a compliment. Come to find out, it meant that it was unpleasing to the ear. And so this poor boy wanted me to sing this song, a Scottish folk ballad, "The Banks of Loch Lomond." I know a little of that song, but I don't know the verses. And he handed me a paper. He'd written out some verses he wanted me to sing. All right. You take the high road, and I'll take the low road. And I'll get to Scotland a but me and my true love will never meet again on these bonny banks of Loch Lomond. It was spring when I met you, and spring when I wed you, and spring when I carried your body. Now your face goes before me forever till I die on these bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Oh, you take the high road, and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland but you will never meet again on these bonny banks of Loch Lomond. And he slept, and he died. I did the best I could. And my governess and I, Miss Clarkston, she found true love. And it happened Roland James, who was the very last one to leave our house. Months later, she did find a good situation. But we did not know what we were going to do. The dead needed a marking. The dead needed to have their information written down. So I got a big ledger book and I wrote the names. And we had decided, my husband and I decided we would bury them by state. We would put them by state. And those poor boys, terrified, had all left a little paper with their name and where they had come from, their city and state. It was as if they were helping us. And so my husband said he would give 2 acres of land, and I knew how we wanted it divided. We would start with a state like Texas, and those boys would be buried and somehow marked. We hadn't decided how we would mark the graves yet. And then we would have an avenue, a place where they could walk if their relatives did come. And then Tennessee boys, and then Mississippi boys, and then Louisiana boys, and on and on and on, the states that were represented in that horrific battle. And so, in my ledger book, I wrote the names. They had been buried. They were brought back. They were reburied in the McGavock Cemetery. And now, first we tried marking them with wooden-like planks and writing the name and writing the date. But that did not last very long. And it was not long until we got native stone that you will see today. Not fancy, but somehow very fitting. And we put the name and the date. It began to be all I thought of. If I looked out those big windows after visiting the children's bed, and I thought that I saw something, I would get the lantern and light it and go down. Now these clothes that we wore during that time, highly combustible, and I was not a graceful lady at the time. I wanted to get out there. What had I seen? Was it an animal? What was it? I was superstitious. So I would go out and John would say, Carrie, you've got to start going at night. You don't even tell me when you're leaving the front door. You've got to watch what you're doing. You could be ablaze and no one would know. And eventually, we had been buried. 1,481 buried on 2 acres. And I visited them. And I began to wear all black. I can't show you my pantaloons, but this is my petticoat. A nice petticoat, black earrings, black everything. And I was continually asked. I had an English gentleman, a writer, Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde came to America, and he said he wanted to meet the woman who built the temple to the fighting boys. And he came to talk to me. He was amazed at what we had done. I couldn't have done it without John. I couldn't have done it without the team that we paid to help exhume and reinter. But we weren't going to move them again. John and I pledged to one another, now let them sleep. And I walked out and I sang sometimes to them, but I kept the graves beautifully clean. Carnton, the cemetery, we gave to men because of what they gave to us. Okay.